Halloween had always been my favorite holiday. The thrill of dressing up in costumes, the promise of sweet treats, and the excitement of trick-or-treating in the moonlit night made it the highlight of my year. Little did I know that one fateful Halloween night would turn into a chilling tale that still haunts my dreams. It was a crisp and moonlit evening, the kind of night that sent shivers down your spine even before the Halloween festivities began. I was 12 years old, and my friends and I had mapped out the perfect trick-or-treat route through our quiet suburban neighborhood. We were determined to fill our pillowcases with as much candy as we could carry. As we set out on our adventure, the night felt electric with anticipation. We visited house after house, our costumes earning us candy and compliments from friendly neighbors, but as the night wore on, we heard whispers of a house that had recently appeared in the neighborhood, a house that was said to be haunted. The house in question was an old Victorian mansion that had been abandoned for years. It stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, shrouded in darkness and mystery. It was the perfect setting for a Halloween dare, and my friends and I couldn't resist the temptation to investigate. As we approached the mansion, a chill swept over us, and the air seemed to grow thick with foreboding. The front gate creaked open on its own, as if inviting us to enter. With hesitant steps, we ventured inside. The mansion's interior was a maze of dusty hallways and shadowy rooms. The walls were adorned with faded portraits of people who seemed to watch us with hollow eyes. We made our way deeper into the house, our flashlights illuminating the eerie surroundings. As we explored, we began to hear strange noises, whispers in the darkness, faint footsteps in distant hallways, and the eerie creaking of floorboards. We convinced ourselves that it was all just our overactive imaginations, fueled by the Halloween atmosphere. But then we stumbled upon a room that sent shivers down our spines. It was a bedroom, untouched by time, with an ornate canopy bed and faded lace curtains. In the center of the room, a mirror stood covered in a dusty cloth. My friends dared me to uncover the mirror, and I reluctantly obliged. As I pulled away the cloth, I gasped in horror at my reflection. It was not my own face that stared back at me, but the face of a gaunt and hollow-eyed child trapped behind the glass. I stumbled back in shock, and my friends screamed in terror. The mirror seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and we could hear the child's voice, faint and distorted, as if it were coming from another world. "Help me," the voice pleaded. "Please, help me." We were paralyzed with fear, unable to tear our eyes away from the haunted mirror. The child's voice grew louder, more desperate, and we could see her tiny hand reaching out as if trying to break free. In a moment of panic, I grabbed the cloth and covered the mirror once more. The room fell silent and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. We fled the mansion, our hearts pounding in our chests, and never looked back. As we regrouped with the other trick-or-treaters, we tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed our tale. They dismissed it as a Halloween prank or the overactive imagination of kids seeking attention. But I knew the truth. I had seen the haunted mirror, heard the desperate pleas of the trapped child, and felt the malevolent energy that lingered in that forsaken mansion. It was a Halloween night I would never forget, a night when the line between the living and the dead had blurred, and the spirit of a tormented child had reached out from the other side. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of the haunted mansion and the haunted mirror still haunts my dreams. Halloween will never be the same for me, a night that is forever tainted by the chilling encounter with the supernatural that turned a simple trick-or-treat adventure into a night of terror and dread.
Halloween had always been our favorite holiday, a time for mischief and scares, and this year was no different. My friends and I had decided to take our Halloween celebration up a notch by playing a daredevil game of Bloody Mary at Sarah's house. We had no idea that this seemingly innocent game would spiral into a nightmarish ordeal we would never forget. It was a chilly October night when we gathered at Sarah's dimly lit house. The air was filled with the scent of burning candles, and our flashlights cast eerie shadows on the walls. Sarah had explained the rules of the game to us. We were to stand in front of her bathroom mirror, summon the spirit of Bloody Mary by repeating her name 3 times, and wait for her to appear. With nervous laughter and eager anticipation, we crowded into the small bathroom, the only light coming from the flickering candles we had strategically placed around the sink. Sarah stood before the mirror, her reflection wavering in the dim light, and took a deep breath. "Okay, guys, here goes nothing," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. We chanted Bloody Mary 3 times in unison, our voices growing louder with each repetition. As the final echo of the name faded away, we stared into the mirror, waiting for something to happen. At first, nothing did. The bathroom remained still, and we exchanged skeptical glances. But just as we were about to dismiss the game as a silly prank, the room grew unnaturally cold, and the candles flickered wildly. Then, in the dimly lit reflection, something appeared. A shadowy figure stood behind Sarah, its eyes glowing with malevolence. It was a woman, her face twisted with anger and sorrow. Her ghostly presence sent shivers down our spines. Sarah let out a terrified scream, and we all turned to look at her, but she was gone. In her place stood the vengeful apparition of Bloody Mary, her ghostly form hovering in the dimly lit bathroom. Panic surged through us as we realized the gravity of the situation. We had summoned a vengeful spirit, and there was no turning back. The apparition reached out with ghostly fingers, her icy touch sending shockwaves of terror through our bodies. We tried to flee, but the bathroom door slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping us inside with the vengeful spirit. She spoke in a voice that was both haunting and mournful, recounting her tragic tale of betrayal and murder. According to her story, Bloody Mary had been a young woman accused of witchcraft in the early 17th century. Falsely accused and condemned to death, she had been executed by drowning in her own home, her body left to rot in the basement. As the tale unfolded, the room seemed to warp and change, and we found ourselves transported to a nightmarish version of the past. We were standing in a dimly lit basement, surrounded by the flickering light of torches, and the stench of death hung heavy in the air. Bloody Mary's ghostly form was bound to a wooden post, her wrists and ankles shackled. Her accusers, dressed in Puritan attire, stood in a circle around her, their faces twisted with hatred and fear. In a gruesome reenactment of her death, they poured water into a wooden barrel, slowly submerging Bloody Mary's head. Her eyes met ours, filled with despair and anguish as she gasped for breath. We were powerless to intervene, mere observers in this horrifying tableau. As the water continued to rise, the room grew colder, and the torches flickered and went out one by one. We were plunged into darkness, the only sound the agonized cries of Bloody Mary as she struggled for air. Suddenly, the room was bathed in a blinding light, and the apparition of Bloody Mary stood before us, her eyes filled with hatred and vengeance. She accused us of mocking her, of invoking her name without understanding the consequences. Desperation seized us as we pleaded for our lives, promising to undo the summoning and set her free. But she was beyond reason, consumed by a centuries-old rage that had festered in her spectral form. With a wave of her ghostly hand, she sent us hurtling back into the present, the bathroom returning to its normal state. But we were forever changed by the experience, haunted by the vengeful spirit we had summoned. As we stumbled out of the bathroom, we vowed never to play with forces we didn't understand. The memory of Bloody Mary's vengeance would haunt our dreams for years to come, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows, waiting to be unleashed by the curious and the foolish on Halloween night.
Halloween had always been a night of adventure and mystery for my group of friends. Each year we searched for the ultimate thrill to celebrate the spookiest night of the year. This time, our curiosity led us to an abandoned church deep within the heart of the United States, a decision that would forever haunt our memories. The church, known as All Hallows Sanctuary, was a relic of a bygone era. Its once majestic spires now stood crooked and broken against the moonlit sky. The legends surrounding it were as chilling as the autumn night, tales of ghostly apparitions, eerie echoes, and unexplained phenomena that lingered within its crumbling walls. The very mention of its name sent shivers down the spines of locals. In costumes that ranged from classic monsters to spectral phantoms, my friends and I gathered at the entrance to the churchyard. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the overgrown grass and time-worn gravestones. The air was thick with anticipation as we approached the ominous structure. The churchyard itself was an eerie place, with gnarled trees casting unsettling shadows and gravestones that seemed to lean ominously. As we drew nearer to the church, a sense of unease hung in the air, as if the very atmosphere resented our presence. With a collective sense of trepidation, we pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the church, and they groaned in protest as they gave way. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of age and decay, and our flashlights struggled to pierce the darkness that engulfed the cavernous space. Our footsteps echoed ominously as we ventured deeper into the church, and the feeling of being watched never left us. Shadows danced on the walls, and strange, unsettling noises seemed to emanate from the very foundations of the building. It was as if the church itself held an ancient grudge against intruders. Our quest for Halloween adventure took a sinister turn when we reached the altar. Instead of candy, we discovered a cryptic message etched into the altar's surface. Beware the spirits that linger here. Turn back now or share their eternal torment. We exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the message sinking in. Was it a mere prank or a warning from something more sinister? Despite our growing unease, we decided to press on, driven by morbid curiosity and the desire to uncover the secrets of the church. As we ventured deeper into the church, we stumbled upon a hidden doorway concealed by a tattered tapestry. The tapestry beckoned us forward, and our curiosity got the better of us. With trembling hands, we pushed it aside and entered a chamber that defied all expectations. The chamber was a macabre spectacle, adorned with cryptic symbols and eerie otherworldly artifacts. At its center stood an ornate altar, upon which rested a book bound in black leather. The symbols etched into the walls seemed to come to life, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive aura. Drawn to the book's eerie allure, we approached it cautiously. Its pages were filled with bizarre incantations and dark rituals, each more unsettling than the last. As we pored over the sinister text, the chamber seemed to come alive with a malevolent energy. Suddenly, the chamber's temperature dropped, and an icy wind blew through the room. The flames of our flashlights flickered and died, leaving us in pitch darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled to find our way out, but the chamber seemed to have transformed into a labyrinth of shifting walls and endless corridors. Whispers echoed in the darkness, and we felt an unseen presence drawing nearer. The air grew thick with an otherworldly dread, and we realized we were not alone. Cold, skeletal fingers brushed against our skin, and ghostly apparitions materialized in the inky blackness. Each specter told a tale of tragedy and woe, of lives cut short, of betrayal, and of a malevolent force that held them in its grip. They spoke of the church's dark history, of rituals gone awry, and of souls ensnared in an unending nightmare. We were paralyzed with fear, unable to escape the nightmarish visions that surrounded us. Suddenly, a blinding light pierced the darkness, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. The walls seemed to tremble as a shadowy figure emerged from the center of the room. It was a grotesque monstrosity, its form shifting and contorting with an otherworldly malevolence. With a bone-chilling howl, the entity reached out with shadowy tendrils, enveloping us in darkness. We screamed in terror as we were pulled into the abyss, our senses overwhelmed by a maelstrom of horror. When we awoke, we found ourselves outside the church, our bodies battered and bruised. The night had taken its toll, and we knew that All Hallows Sanctuary was a place of true terror. Halloween had transformed from a night of revelry into a night of unimaginable horror, and we had learned the hard way that some mysteries were better left untouched, lest they consume us in their relentless darkness.
Halloween, the night when the boundary between the living and the dead grows thin, has always been a time of fascination for me. The chill in the air, the rustling leaves, and the thrill of eerie costumes made it a night I looked forward to each year. Little did I know that one Halloween would turn into a nightmarish encounter that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It was the autumn of my senior year in high school. My friends and I had decided to take our Halloween celebration to the next level. Instead of the usual costumey party, we planned to explore an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town, a place infamous for its sinister reputation. The locals called it the House of Shadows, a name that sent shivers down the spines of anyone who dared utter it. On Halloween night, our group gathered at the entrance to the woods that led to the House of Shadows. Dressed in costumes ranging from classic monsters to horror movie characters, We were filled with youthful enthusiasm and the promise of adventure. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the towering trees and the overgrown path ahead. The air was cool, laden with the scent of fallen leaves, and a sense of trepidation tingled in our bones. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the darkness became oppressive. The path grew narrower and the trees closed in around us. Our flashlights cut through the inky blackness, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters in the night. The legends surrounding the House of Shadows were numerous and chilling. They spoke of a family that had once lived there, a family that had dabbled in dark rituals and occult practices. Tales of their descent into madness, strange disappearances, and eerie happenings filled the town's folklore. Our quest for Halloween adventure soon turned into a nightmare when we finally reached the ominous silhouette of the House of Shadows. The house loomed before us, its windows shattered and its walls marred by graffiti. It seemed to leer at us like a malevolent specter, its broken and boarded-up windows casting ominous shadows. A sense of foreboding hung in the air as we approached the front door. It creaked open with a mournful groan, revealing a dark and musty interior. We exchanged nervous glances, our flashlights illuminating a decaying staircase that led into the bowels of the house. As we ventured deeper into the darkness, the air grew heavy, and the oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in around us. Dust motes danced in the beam of our flashlights, casting eerie shapes on the rotting wallpaper. Every footstep echoed with an unsettling resonance, as though the very walls were whispering secrets. The house was a labyrinth of dilapidated rooms, each more unsettling than the last. Broken furniture, shattered glass, and faded photographs lay scattered about, frozen in time. As we explored further, we began to notice strange symbols etched into the walls, symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Our sense of unease intensified when we entered what appeared to be the family's ceremonial chamber. Candles, long extinguished, littered the floor, and a sinister altar stood at its center. On the altar lay a book bound in ancient leather, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and bizarre incantations. Drawn to the book's eerie allure, we approached it cautiously. We couldn't resist the temptation to read from its pages, to speak the incantations that had not been uttered in years. As we recited the words, an icy wind blew through the chamber, extinguishing our flashlights and plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled for our flashlights, but the darkness seemed to have taken on a life of its own. Whispers echoed through the chamber, and we felt an unseen presence drawing near. The air grew thick with an otherworldly dread, and we realized we were not alone. Suddenly, the room was filled with a ghastly, otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows that danced up on the walls. The air grew frigid, and the room seemed to come alive with an unearthly presence. Apparitions materialized in the darkness, their eyes vacant and hollow, their forms twisted and contorted. Each specter told a tale of torment and despair, of the family's descent into madness, of dark rituals gone awry, and of the malevolent force that had consumed them. They spoke of their eternal suffering, trapped in a nightmarish limbo, and they longed for release. As we listened to their chilling tales, the symbols etched into the walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and the very ground beneath us shook with an unnatural force. The room began to crumble, and a deafening roar filled the air as the walls closed in around us. We screamed in terror as the room collapsed, and we were swallowed by darkness. When I awoke, I found myself lying outside the House of Shadows, my friends strewn about in various states of disarray. The night had taken its toll on us, and we knew that the House of Shadows was a place of true horror. Halloween had transformed from a night of revelry into a night of unimaginable terror, and we had learned the hard way that some mysteries were better left untouched, lest they consume us in their relentless darkness.